What are you doing, huh? Yeah, we're live. Huh, Milo? Come here. What are you doing? Come say hello. Come say hello. Milo's in the house. Good morning, everybody. Get your projects done. Morning motivation. Go get that stuff done. Huh, Milo? What? Do you want to lay down? Huh? Are you doing good? Okay, lay down, sweetie. You're okay. I know. More petting. I know. Good boy. So get those projects done. Today, I want to talk to you about Detonation, our very good friend, Detonation, something that nobody wants to see. But more specifically, the thumbnail photo that I have up is a forged piston that has machined valve reliefs in it. So if you take a look at them, if you look really closely, I don't know if you can look very closely at the small thumbnail photo, but if you can, you'll see that they have, when they machine this on this forging, that they have sharp edges on it. So there are sharp edges where the cutter has cut the valve reliefs. And so the question is, we've all been taught over the years that if you have a sharp edge on there, that you can create localized hotspots, and we can initiate detonation and it can propagate from that area of the hotspot. The question is, does that really happen? I think it does. But should you and would you dress that area before you put a piston in? So that will be our poll for today. Before you install pistons, do you before you install pistons, do you knock down all the sharp edges on the valve reliefs? So that will be our poll for today. So do you just grab them and put them in? And the other question is, and as a related question, because if you have the pistons out, obviously it's a lot easier for you to either take a lot of times I'll use a porting tool with the sanding rolls on it, the porting rolls. And I'll take and dress those. Sometimes I'll just take emery cloth or sandpaper myself and just use my thumb and wipe it, just to get the thing so it's a rolled edge and not a super sharp edge. Sometimes I go to the extreme, like I have on the Engine Masters deals. We'll end up polishing the whole piston top. We'll use different. I took all of those edges off, and the edge around the outside, if the valve relief overhangs the edge of the piston, which I don't like, but sometimes it's necessary depending on where the valve placement is relative to the center line of the piston. So sometimes it overhangs that outer edge, which I think tends to weaken the piston. But we sharpen all of those edges, especially if it just leaves, this little fine little trough, like a little sliver, like a thing that almost cut you, like a knife edge. So we take that off, and then I ended up doing finer and finer sandpaper, 1,000, 1,500, whatever the lowest one or the biggest numerical one, but the finest sandpaper that we had. And then we go into actually polishing it. And the thing was like a mirror finish when it was done. Once you start going down the path, you're going to do that. I don't think that did anything. I don't think it reflected all the power and did all that stuff, but it did for certain eliminate any potential hotspots based on there being sharp edges on anything in the piston. Would you then also do that on the combustion chamber? If you have overhang at the combustion chamber somehow smaller than the chamber is, somehow smaller than the cylinder bore is? Do you have areas where there were places in the combustion chamber, like where they had machined it threaded it for the valves or for the spark plug, where that comes in? Sometimes you have edges on the chamber design if they've got like swirl dams in them or things like that. So sometimes there are things like that in the chamber where it's either been machined or part of the chamber design, and then you go ahead and knock that down a little bit. So if you're going to do it with a piston, why wouldn't you do it on the chamber as well? Just to make sure that you help eliminate that. And then the whole softening the chamber would be another discussion for another day on what you would need to do to soften the chamber, which would definitely help its resistance to detonation. That would definitely change it. And I still want to do a dedicated video on that. and I need to do it in a vehicle actually, because we want to demonstrate the change in, the best way to show that would be to show the change in knot counts. And on an engine dyno, because we can run when we're running it cold and running it with cold air going to the motor and all that, when we're doing that, we can run like 11-to-1 motors with full timing on 91 and not have any problem. So we know that we have already minimized detonation just from our environment. So what I would want to do is run something in a vehicle and then run it on 91 and then tune it and see how much timing and stuff we could get away with. And all we're trying to do is figure out where this thing runs into detonation, and then take the heads off, soften the chambers, or put other heads on where we've softened the chambers, and then redo the test and see if we can we add more timing. Now we know that we can, or at least in my discussions with Brian Tooley, where this has been done and run on, dedicated kind of race motors, they have been able to, they've been successful at running more timing, even on turbo applications and stuff, where, and a lot of times you can pick up power when you're doing that. And this is especially the case when you're trying to get something with a dedicated or a specific size wheel that they allow because of class regulations. So if you're, a lot of times if it's easier, if it's unlimited, then you can just put bigger turbos on it, turn the boost up and make more power. That's obviously the easier route. But when you're limited by class regulations, you have to start finding little bits of power in a whole bunch of different areas rather than a big chunk of power. Let's just put a bigger turbo on it, turn the boost up. That's always the answer to everything. It's obviously a lot easier to do that. But the question is, would you, and we'll see what people are doing on the poll, but do you do that as a matter of fact? And then if the piston, like I was talking about earlier before I got off on a tangent, if the pistons are, if you buy a like piston and rod and crank assembly, maybe you brought a stroker deal, maybe you just bought pistons, and maybe you just bought pistons and rods, and then you would go and dress those because that's very easy. They're already off, but and clean them before you put your rings on, and hopefully you gap your rings. And then when you did your rings, hopefully you knock all of the edges from gapping your rings, that you knock all of the edges off of all four corners. Because usually when you're doing rings, you'll take it off of one side. The other side just stays the way that it is. And then you'll knock all of because when you're grinding it, it puts directional overhang on the ring. And so you would want to knock all that down and make sure that it's a nice rolled edge. And then you can argue about whether a nice rolled edge allows more blow by, all that stuff. People want to talk about the tiniest little things, but knock all that down and then you can put the piston in. But the question is, if you get, what happens if you get a short block? What if you get an assembled short block that needs that done to it? Would you do that on the assembled short block? Or would you take the assembled short block and disassemble it, take the pistons out, and then do that, and then clean the pistons and then put them back in? That, by the way, would be the right way to do it. I'm not asking you whether you would only do it the right way. I'm asking you whether or not you would take the piston up to the top, maybe put grease around it, where the oil ring is, and then, because you could do that with I've done that before, where we just take and have a little strip of sandpaper, sanding disc, and then just go and knock all the edges down with the thing still in there, and then just make sure you clean it out really well with air. And that seems to work fairly well. Lots of people will scoff at that, but then they obviously haven't seen what a razor blade rebuild is on something where we've gotten it from the wrecking yard and knocked and ball honed it with the piston still in the hole and all that. And it works. I mean, whether it's ideal and it's perfect is over here, whether you shouldn't be doing it is way over here. And then all in this middle area, all the gray area, there's lots of stuff that works and can be done. And then people can argue. And that's really what social media is about. It's all that gray area. If you say, look, I took my thing to the machine shop, had everything perfect. I have it line board and honed and decked and paralleled and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, good. That's the right way to do it. If you tell them that you ball honed it with the pistons in, then it sends people into, into a tizzy. Then they go crazy. And that's what social media is about. Telling people that, you can't do that. Yes, you can. No, you can't. And then they argue back and forth. In fact, one of the, on Facebook, one of my posts about ball honing that thing is the most popular one because people are bickering back and forth. And that's what happens is you get people arguing, because their way is the best way and this guy's way is the best way. And since they both have the best way, only one person can have the best way. And so that they get to argue back and forth about which best way is actually the best way. It's good stuff. But let's get back to our testing. So would you do that with the engine assembled? Would you disassemble the engine and run it and then put it back together and do it properly? Would you just dress it and knock the big edges down? Maybe there are big edges and small edges. So what would you do there? Do you do that as a matter of like on every motor that you build? So for instance, if you say that, yeah, I do this on every motor that I build, if the pistons are out of the motor, I do that, then put the motor together. If I get a short block, I would take them out and then do it and then put it back together. What happens if you got a long block or a complete motor? If you buy a complete motor from GM and it has that, do you take the motor apart and then dress that and then dress any issues that you might have in the combustion chamber and then put it all back together? I'd say the number of those people as we go through those successive steps get smaller and smaller. As a matter of fact, I don't know anybody that would take apart a brand new crate motor and do that and then put it back together. If you were taking it apart because you bought a brand new crate motor or traded it for something or whatever, and you got a brand new crate motor and you were upgrading it, let's say that you were putting a camshaft in, you're like, I'm just going to put head studs and springs and I'm upgrading it anyway. Maybe you got a B15 crate motor from GM and you decided, hey, look, because it does need head studs. It does need valve springs. A better camshaft is definitely the way to go. And if you're taking that all apart, you're like, I'm going to put ring gap in it. And since I'm going to put ring gap in it, I'm also going to do the piston. But would you do it just to knock the sharp edges down? I think the number of people that would do that is next to nothing. I've never met anybody that would do that. I've met lots of people that would do the other things. I've done the other things where we take a B15 apart as an example, and there would be others too, where we take that apart and do all of those upgrades to it. Because while it will run the way that it is, it has stock valve springs in it. It doesn't have a great camshaft in it. It does need head studs and all of that stuff, especially since it's a boosted motor. I would feel better wanting to run the kind of boost that we would run on a B15, which we've run 25 pounds on them before. I'd feel much better doing all that stuff. And so that would be part of it. And if you're taking it all apart, it's much easier to do that. But I don't know that I've ever got a crate motor from GM or Blueprint or back when we used to get stuff from Coast High Performance or any of those guys. If the motor was all together, I never took it back apart to knock down the edges to help ward off detonation. Although it might not be a bad idea if it was something you were putting in a vehicle and you were kind of on the edge of where detonation should be, where you think it might be, versus running on pump gas, and maybe that could help you and actually run another couple degrees of timing. So that would be the other question is, if we see a sharp edge in these pistons, and that has the potential to create situations where detonation might occur, how much does it do that? Like, is it 1 degree of timing? Is it 2 degrees of timing? Is it the equivalent of 10 degrees of air temperature? Like, what is the crossover point where it happens and it doesn't happen? Is it sustained load? Is it sustained temperature? What is it? And then, where are we at in this? Okay, detonation happens all the time. Detonation doesn't happen. Where is that? Where is the sharp edge in relation to those two things? Can we get another degree of timing? Can we get 10 degrees hotter temperature before that happens? Where are we in that scale of things? And those are the things I think about. And the problem is that I don't ever see, and I can't even do that kind of testing, because you'd need ultra sophisticated knock sensor technology that would have to be, 100% like perfectly repeatable, so that you could then change one of those situations. And then you'd have to have the ability to change air temperature going into the motor, which some systems have the ability to do that. We could artificially create that. And then timing obviously would be fairly easy to change. And then water temperature would be fairly easy to change. So those are the kind of tests. But again, the thing that you're looking for is is very tiny. And so you could say, oh yeah, if you knock down the edges, that would be the same as adding a degree of timing. Is it easier just to take the 1 degree of timing out if that's what it is? Is it 5 degrees? It's probably closer to the 1 degree thing. But I would like to see that kind of testing. And I'm sure the OEMs have done that, and the SAE guys that test at that level probably have done that. I would be curious to see that. And then also, when you do that, because like here would be the next level of testing. Let's say that you structured that test and you structured it the way that I was talking about, and you found out that, okay, it's if you change the air temperature by 8 degrees, or you change the timing by 1.5 degrees, or 1.5 degrees, or water temperature by 14 degrees, whatever the numbers are, and you did that, and you get some of these things that show, okay, look, this is the equivalent of this. So if you do this, you get these benefits. Okay, great. That's perfect. Now we have some sort of absolute correlation here. Is it only on that motor? What happens if we didn't do it on a 5.3 LS? What happens if we did it on a 4.8, where the stroke is different and the piston speed is different and the power output's different? And so now what happens if we do it on a 6.2 that has higher static compression and different cam timing, or a big block Chevy with iron heads? And you see what I'm getting at? Is the information that we got only for that motor under those conditions? Does it not? Because we all want it to. I know that the people on the internet, because I see the comments all the time, we all want it to be an absolute. People want, how much boost can I run with stock gap? Well, we already have a variable there because we don't know what stock gap is. And then we also don't know for how long you're running boost. And there's actually not a direct correlation between boost and ring gap, but that's what they want. And if I did this scenario that I'm talking about, where we found out how much softening or rolling these edges back, how much it equated to, would it only equate to that, even if we could get that information, which would be hard as we talked about? Would it only be on that motor under those conditions? Would it not be a universal thing, which is what everybody wants? And so even if we did that test and didn't get a universal answer that people want, would that be beneficial? I think it would, because I'd like to see that. But I don't think that it would. I don't think you can then extrapolate that to everything else. And so then you'd have to test another combination, another combination, another combination, and so on, so that you have to do like all the testing in the world. So let's see how you guys are doing their projects. But first, let's check our poll. Before you install pistons, do you knock down all of the sharp edges? 69% are saying yes. 68%. It just dropped right as I said it. So I'm going to scroll back here, see what people are doing. Say hi to everybody. Sharp edges are not the issue. Hot spots are. I do with nitrous. If I was so worried about detonation, I would have thermal coating. I just go over sharp edges, 1 hot spot, 2 great places for starting cracks. Peening or polishing, of course I do. Then I weigh them all. So you're thinking that if you sanded them and then you took material out, you'd think that you'd throw the balance off? C16 obviously would help. The octane would definitely change things. If you burn enough oil, the carbon coating works just fine. That's it. That's like the cheap way to get your pistons coated, right? Is just burn a little bit of oil or put more carbon deposits on it. So just run it rich for a while. More concerned with chamber diameter and quints. Yeah, except that most people, that's fixed. So they get that and they don't alter the chamber design. Because if we're running a junkyard motor, it is the way that it is. Sharp edges are thin spots. If it gets too hot, aluminum gets what's called hot short overheating. I'm an aluminum welder. It's a strange thing that happens. It actually crumbles. Aluminum heads, good fuel, cool inlet temps, proper timing, all of that is good. Open chambers, pistons, 70 thousandths in the hole. A lot of times putting it too far down in the hole doesn't help suppress detonation because you get a trade-off. The sound of bacon cooking. Chevy 4 4.3 liter V6 model, make good horsepower with a cam in it. Yeah, I have 4.3 liter V6 stuff up, and we ran a couple of cams in it so you could see what they do. Getaway, stay safe, y'all. Someone got sick yesterday, nose and throat. Uh-oh, that's not good. Good evening. Good morning. What? I do that on nearly every engine. Even the ones that you buy, they're crate motors. B15 is a Honda engine. Yeah, I had in my VX, I had a B15 Z1, but a B15 is also the designation for the LS, like boost ready crate motor from GM. It's worth pulling a 350 out of vehicle if I'm doing a cam and intake. I'm not sure if I'm doing aftermarket heads. It's depends on how hard it is to work on in your truck. Is it a big lifted thing, and is it going to be hard to do that stuff? Pulling the engine is usually not that hard, depending on how many accessories and all that stuff that you have. And then you could do it on an engine stand, and you can clean it and maybe service it or change some gaskets and stuff while it's out. That would be nice. Otherwise, doing an intake at a cam in the vehicle is not that hard. When do you think you should use a 4-bolt main block on a small block? Is it horsepower limited or RPM? I don't think you need a 4-bolt main for most kinds of 400 horsepower or so street applications. Your keyboard's going crazy. Most people think that the 4-bolt is a horsepower requirement because it's cylinder pressure and load pushing down on the crank and the caps. Plenty of room, 88 Silverado, just a bit of hassle to hang over the fenders. That's the thing. It is leaning over that is not great. I use a Dremel. Yeah, that works good. Have a die grinder. Yep, that's good. I can be standing in the engine bay. Yeah, that's good. My inline 6-cylinder, like 3 or 4 steps. Nice. Standing on the ground in the engine bay. That makes life a lot easier. Or if you like with a cam, how hard is it to pull the front of the truck off? Can't think of any questions. I've answered all of them. There's got to be more questions. Dan, you saw me on Dylan McCool's live chat last night? It probably wasn't me. The single over cams are D series. They also have single overhead cam. Some of the Prelude stuff was like that too. Is it an F series that's that? Yeah, F and B, that's right. Does anyone know if LS3 heads would support a low compression 416? Yes, very easily. The LS3 heads flow enough to support. We've made over 650 with a stock LS3 head. So if you have a low compression 416, it's not going to make that much any power. I think he's talking about the D15Z1. The D15 that I was talking about was the crate motor. The D15Z1 was the VX engine. E-Series Hondas with single cam. Ordered my 632 from Blueprint to confirm that they're a good company for me. Nice. The guys at West Tech and Engine Masters have run a couple of those 632s, I think. Yeah, Dylan McCool is supposed to be building himself a Turbo 318, but I haven't been on anything with Dylan. The 2.2 and the 2.5 projects are going good. I'm actually thinking about going back, and because I don't know if the painting is going to happen until the spring. So I'm thinking about going back and getting the running car and bringing it out here and getting it certified, since the engine is already in there and stuff. And then I can use it to do some also chassis dyno testing and stuff down at West Tech, and then take it back and have the painting and stuff done when it gets warmer back there. Florida's in the house. You see a trend with piston type and boost. When you start getting into type, you're looking at very specific things. I think most guys, when they're choosing a piston for a turbo application, they're looking more at what their static compression would be. And then they could also be looking at, piston strength, which you'd be looking at the distance from the top ringland or to the top ringland. So the crown thickness, and then skirt design and stuff, but not so much normally when guys are asking me about pistons, I recommend a flat top piston, but it would depend on what they're doing with the compression. I don't like a big open dish. I would rather have a dish that has a dedicated quench. I think that probably works better. But again, I think the compression is going to be the big thing, and then the quench is going to be the other thing. And so I would like to see how much the other thing is worth, and then how much is it worth like at each successive power levels. So is it worth a lot at 1500 and not very much at 500? Those are all questions I ask. 416 low compression, supercharged. It should make a good bit of power. But the thing is that you're really concerned more on the cylinder head for that application, on what it will support NA, because once you have positive pressure in it, it'll support a lot more power. So a set of factory LS3 heads will have enough flow to support 2,000 horsepower when they're boosted. So that's not a problem. Flat top piston for detonation resistance. Like we were talking about, there are a number of things to talk about for that. The detonation resistance is first, I think, going to come from compression ratio, and then quench area. And so whether or not the flat top does those things would be something you have to look at on your particular application. Ring gap for a 6.4, 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore is normally what we do. Why do forged flat top pistons have valve reliefs as opposed to, say, a flat top Gen 4 piston? Because the factory doesn't need a valve relief for the camshafts that they're using in that stock application, because they don't need valve reliefs because they don't have nearly enough camshaft. But when you put an aftermarket piston in, you kind of want it to have a valve relief so that you can put more camshaft in it. If you're not going to utilize that, then just running a stock flat top and going up to whatever camshaft you can run with the stock flat top with no valve relief in there. But valve reliefs will give you more like camshaft room. Every cam is a turbo cam. I have one of the D15 super efficient heads in my shed. I'm a big fan of that car. I gave it to my buddy Chad, and it would be nice to have, but I always wanted to have it in turbocharged form. Did a 30 ring gap on my 5.3. I was going to boost. Got a 6-liter now. I'm going to sell the 5.3 to a friend going in a stock Tahoe. Would it be okay with no boost in that gap? Yes. No, I did. Thank you for reminding me. I did not turn on live chat. Live chat. There we go. So before you install pistons, do you knock down all the sharp edges? 67% are saying yes. Thanks, Sergeant. If you're tuning a turbo LS and the spark plugs, BR70F is dark on the first 3 threads, would you go one step colder? What is your combination, and how much timing are you running, and how much booster are you running, and what is the air fuel? And then I'll answer your plug question. I'm a big fan of the old D series stuff. Hard to find good transmissions. A lot of notchy third gears in those things from guys racing them around. I had to change one of the synchros in my trans on the, because it had, I don't know, it had a few 100,000 miles on, 300,000+ miles on it, which is, you know, that's a lot. The nice thing about the transmissions in a, if you have a VX motor, is that guys are not revving those things out very much. They're not racing them around. They're much more of a mileage oriented thing. So I mean, not that guys won't, but I think you'd be less inclined to be racing something with that motor than you would with an SI, like a D16. If you stayed out of boost with that miles per, yeah. If the reason that I'd want a turbo is I'd like to have, like, I always wanted that car. I thought it'd be cool if that car could go 150 miles an hour and have 50 miles per gallon. I just thought it'd be a good mix. It would take a bit of work to get it to be able to go that fast. Like, it would take 200 wheel horsepower or so to get it to go that fast. And I don't know if I could get there with an otherwise stock D series and boost. But even if the thing had like 150 or 160 wheel horsepower, it'd be a lot of fun. Because that thing would go on a 65 to 70 mile an hour cruise from driving from here down to Southern California. It would get 55. It could get 55. Liquid nitrogen versus dry ice and water versus antifreeze. Liquid nitrogen would be way colder. It's just not logistically viable. Have you ran a 350 Vortec with 305 heads? No, I have not. I'm curious why you would pick the 305 heads. Are you doing it for compression? Richard, after so much engine dyno time, what do you prefer for tuning an engine, chassis, or engine? What I'm doing is not, because what you're asking, I think, is ultimate tuning to be able to take the car out and go use it. That's not what I do on the engine dyno. So I don't, and I'm not a tuner. So you're asking the wrong kind of question. When I'm doing stuff on the engine dyno, I'm only tuning it to get the maximum power. So then I can change something and then get the maximum power from that other thing. If you want to tune it because you're going to go run it out in the real world, then you would do that on a combination of the chassis dyno and the street, because an engine dyno won't give you the loads that are imposed when you're actually driving the car. Kirby, you want to know what would add power to a 4.3 liter V6? Exhaust, air intake, tune, camshaft, springs. Do you need extra ring gap for 150 shot of nitrous? If you're putting together a 383 stroker, I would put the gap on the loose side already as a performance deal. And so that would be enough for a 150 shot. My 6-air pistons are 6 out of the hole, not unusual. Does that help combat pre-ignition? Again, it can and it can't. It adds static compression, and obviously that changes dynamic compression as well. That may help rather than having it's going to change the quench, certainly, because that's why they have 53 gaskets, and because sometimes those things are as much as 10 out of the hole, and that's why they have a 53,000 gasket, so that you would have better quench. So the answer is possibly yes and possibly no. In your specific application, maybe yes. Stock FD is 302 on the turbo A for 2.2 or 2.5. Should I swap transfer gears to 2.6? Looking for higher top speed, less race miles, but don't want to dog off the line. Is there a way that you can do if you're doing are you talking about 2.2 or 2.5. Are you talking about the Dodge 2.2 and 2.5 transmissions on those? And if you want more mileage, what I recommend is not changing the final drive unless that's the only option. If you could change fifth gear only, that would be good. Yeah, Mike, the engine dyno doesn't, the way that it loads like an initial stationary load and then a release and then a controlled amount of acceleration, even though we can alter that, we can't do, you know, different boost in gears and transitions from throttle positions and all that. All of that really needs to be done. They can do a lot of that on the chassis dyno. And then when they do that on the chassis dyno, they always take it out and drive it around and make sure that it's right. Doing it from more compressions, going in 3500 dually 5-speed. It has 6.5 that blew up. Final drive ratio on the trans, a 3-speed. Oh, so it's the automatic versions for those K car deals. You should put a 5-speed in it. Would you recommend a chassis dyno after engine dyno for optimum performance? Is it beneficial? Well, when we run stuff on the engine dyno, a lot of guys will just run, like they'll bring over an LS motor, a lot of engine builders, and they'll just run it with a carburetor. Because all they're trying to find out is the engine sealed and is it right? And does it have oil pressure? It doesn't leak. Nothing's, yeah, everything's put together right. Nothing's broke. It makes power. It's working. And then they'll put it in the vehicle and then chassis dyno tune it. Because engine dyno tuning is not tuning that makes you go, that allows you to go drive the car. That the engine dyno tuning is only tuning for power, basically. If you get really good, and like Ish and Eric, you probably could tune it on the engine dyno and get very close because they know what's going to translate one thing to the other. And having tuned a whole bunch of combinations, they can make that work fairly well. But still, the tuning for driving around and stuff is not going to happen on the engine dyno. It's going to happen somewhere else. My 93 Coupe has an LS VTEC with a 186 on a Mustang. I get 18 miles per gallon. What's a 186? Like built for boost, but see if you can make the 1,000,000-mile LS motor. You want something that would go for 1,000,000 miles. Your best bet would be to use a factory one. Do you have any videos on cam timing? You mean adjusting the cams? Do you want to do that on a single cam or a twin cam? What are you looking at? Or a quad cam? There's a lot of work making it drive on the street like an OEM car. Yeah, they spend millions of dollars on getting their tunes right. They go to high elevations. They go to really cold areas. They go to really, really hot areas. They do dumb stuff with it because there's going to be people doing dumb stuff with it. It's having everything be perfect like somebody expects from an OEM application is very difficult. It's not something that the average guy is going to be able to tune in. Mike, I have done some advancing and retarding cam testing on the engine dyno, but the problem is that you're only doing that specific thing and that specific camshaft. Again, it's not a universal thing. We tend to think that advancing the cam improves low speed power, retarding the cam improves high speed power. And we see this in the variable cam stuff sometimes. But it doing that is also by design. They've made their VVT cam be that so that it does that, so that and they're doing it more for emissions and drivability and mileage and that kind of stuff than they are for power. They're probably concentrating on the emissions and drivability and mileage thing and then retarding it so that they can get more power. But again, they've made it specifically do that. If you just go grab a performance cam in and put it in and then go, okay, well, I'm going to pick up more power by advancing it. You may not. for one thing, the cam's already designed probably to make low speed power. It already has probably 2 or 4 degrees of advance built into it, and you advancing it more could just lose power. And maybe on your application, it doesn't like that. And so you'd have to test your specific thing. And again, it's not going to be universal. It might only do that thing on your specific thing. I certainly thought that the LS9 camshaft was going to respond to advancing the cam timing. And I thought it was going to pick up a lot of low speed power, and it did not. Can you recommend a book for building a Ford engine for beginners? Yeah, I think I have some. Where's my Ford stuff here? Ford, Chevy, maximum power Pontiacs, small block Chevys, bolt-ons. Let's see. V6 performance, Ford Focus power, Ford Mustangs, Ford engine parts interchange. The Ford Performance by Pat Ganal is pretty good. And I don't even know if these are still available, but these are. Here are a couple that I have. I have more than that too, but here are some. How to build Barry Robotnik, how to build maximum performance Ford FE engines. So if it's an FE, there's the one to look at. And Barry has built some good engines. This one has a lot of old school information, Ford Performance, including all Ford engines. So it's got big blocks and small blocks and Cleveland's and also FE stuff. And then for a beginner thing, this might be okay. I don't know that I've read this one. How to rebuild big block Ford engines. And I'm sure that they probably have a small block version of this one. But disassembly, inspection, this kind of takes you how to like rebuild an engine, and it works for everything, how to check bearing clearances and all that stuff. So all of those are potential. And thank you for your support. A 413, take the tire off and side cover. You can change the transfer gears for 3.22, 302, or 260 to get 278. You need to pull the trans. 5-speed is harder. People like going from a 385 to a 3.5. I want to be the dumb stuff tester. I think Gen 4 piston should be okay. My twin turbo 5.3. Yeah, we took those to 1500, so you're fine at 750. I'm curious about cam timing as well. I have this LSV Tech Honda, and I'm currently -1 on the exhaust and +1 on the intake. I'm rich at crossover and feel like I'd add more timing with cam. The doing B series twin cam stuff, and especially VTEC stuff, took hours and hours and hours to get all of the cam timing sweeps. So what you have to do when you're doing twin cam stuff like that is you have to advance and retard one and see where it is, and then move the exhaust cam 1 degree in whichever direction you're going, and then go through that sweep again, and then move it another degree, and then go through all that sweep again, and then move another degree. And then also when you're doing it, you have to be mindful that you move the distributor also on the Honda stuff. So and then you have to make sure that it's repeatable for each movement that you've made. So it takes a lot, especially on a chassis dyno, to make sure that everything is exact and repeatable. And again, on some of these motors, you may be looking for changes of 1 or 2 horsepower. So it's a lot to go through all of that. And what we found is that you're probably not going to get huge gains from swinging cams. You can get big losses from swinging the cams. So it's easy to tune yourself out of a good combination. Every cam is a turbo cam. Eric took an LQ9, swapped the flats with Ford's -10 cc, add 706 heads, add the piston squirters, got rings to 28, 15 pounds in mine with pump gas. Will it survive? All of that's the strength of all of the parts that you're talking about is not an issue at all. The tune is going to be the critical thing. And with 15 pounds, why did you go to the trouble of putting forged pistons in with valve reliefs and then putting 706 heads on it? 706 heads would be a lot better than a 317 head. I'll give you that. Added piston squirters, 15 pounds. Well, 15 pounds. Did you put a camshaft in this thing also? Richard, I have the Ford Cleveland book with you building the 400M. Wish my Nissan would eat one of my cats. They shed constantly. Stock bottom end 5.3 with ring gap. What cam should I run with a TrickFlow 225 head? The TrickFlow 225 head should already have springs in it. And what intake are you using and how much power are you trying to make? Are you a 225 head on a 5.3? It's going to work, but it's the chamber on that is much bigger than the bore size is. Four G63s can make lots and lots of power. Richard, have you ever back halved a car? I don't think I have. I wouldn't have ever done it to any of my cars. And I don't remember even helping somebody like hack and slash on theirs to get that ready. But after the first cut, you'll get into it. Tenth day with COVID, that's not good. Rod, thanks for the feedback. Ish did the engine dyno tuning. I'll be bringing the car back to the chassis down. Yeah, Ish and Eric are both really good. Is there a way to advance the timing on a 6-liter without going into the stock computer? I don't know what the factory parameters look like. If maybe you can fool a sensor or something. Okay, let's take it to the 205 TrickFlow and the 5.3. Will be for you can run a 205 head. That's good. Are you needing that head for the power output that you want? That's my question. I'm just trying to save you money if you don't need that. Because if you're putting a mild camshaft in it and you're only trying to make 400 horsepower, then you don't need a cylinder head. A 205 head would be when you're trying, or even a 225 or a 215 head or a ASCAS 220. If you're trying to make 500 and you need a good head to get there, you would need that kind of cylinder head. But if you just want to put a cam in it and make for low to mid fours, you don't need a cylinder head to do that. You need the cylinder head to get you to the next level. And you also need a really good intake manifold if you're going to try to get to 500. Richard, how can I get a modern ring pack in my FE and still run on 87 octane? The 87 octane is going to have nothing to do with the ring pack. That's going to have to do with your static compression and dynamic compression and air temperature and water temperature and all that. And also, I don't know what cylinder head you have on there and what your chamber design is and all of that stuff. I don't know what ring pack. If that's an original piston in there and not an aftermarket piston, it might have a 5/64 ring pack. And maybe you could do ring spacers then, but the easiest way is just to change the piston. Whatever happened to the 2.2 head David was supposed to be porting? He still is doing it, and I think it's almost done. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get on the phone with him right when we get off of here. He's yelling at me about me telling people that the 128 camshaft formula wasn't the end all thing, and because there are so many other variables when choosing a camshaft. So I'm about to get yelled at, so it'll be fun. He's good people, so it's always a good conversation when I talk to David. Can I put a turbo kit on my stock 225? Yes. You don't need to do any block prep. You just have to make sure that you get the air, fuel, and timing right on it, and don't run a lot of boost on it. I bet you want to run boosts. I want over 500 horsepower. Yeah, if you want over that, then a 205 head's really good on that, or a ported 706 or 862 head is really good on that. If you're trying to make 500, you're going to need a big camshaft, something in the 230 to 235 at 50 on the intake duration, and then a fast intake manifold. If you're running boost, I wouldn't do any of that. Put a smaller camshaft in it, run the stock head with springs, and then after you add boost, you'll have all the power that you need, and you'll have better low speed power. Uncle Tony's garage just met up with Vizard. Why is it drama time? Those guys get along good, I thought. One thing people get wrong is taking out the balance shafts. Balance shaft removal is like the go-to thing for all of these motors. The guys do it on the little Dodges, on the Starions. They did that. They want to take them out of the 4.3 V6s. I didn't have detonation issues with my 355 11.5 to 1 of the big cam. The big cam is a big detonation inhibitor. Obviously changes the dynamic compression. Two more minutes, and we're going to close out our poll at 67% saying yes. They are going to sand those sharp edges down, and it is a good idea. What I'd like to see, and I'm sure that the OEMs have this, is I would really like to see the trace, the frequency trace with and without the balance shaft. And I'd like to see it. And I'd actually like to see it at multiple throttle angles and multiple RPM sweeps. I think that would be interesting to see. And I'd also like to talk to the engineers and see how much less they think the motor, how many fewer miles they think the thing would last without the balance shafts. That Uncle Tony was sour. You disapproved his piston flip. He doesn't like me because he's Uncle Tony. But David Vizard gets along with him really well. Does pump gas and water meth have the same potential as the 85? Not in any of my testing. It hasn't. David Vizard checks valve clearance around piston edges. You should check the valve clearance everywhere. Quad 4 turbo would be cool. I do like those motors. Have you ever done cooling mods? I haven't done like rerouting of cooling, just changing temperature. But like external feeds for the cylinder heads and stuff, all of that. I think we did try that on the. Did we do that on the Engine Masters motor? No, I think I was thinking about drilling the. We were talking about drilling the AFR heads to see if we could get change the cooling, because we were running in detonation essentially. we made runs while the thing was detonating, but you wanted it to happen just a little bit because you had to have, you're trying to get all the power that you could. So those kinds of things might have helped that. What I did do is speed the electric water pump up with the boosted pump, and that seemed to help. Let's see. I mean, make sure he has maximum flow around valves on pistons. Kind of ports the piston. G63 without balance shafts will vibrate the rear view mirrors. Good spot one. Do big injectors like Bosch 210s sacrifice drivability? Potentially, depending on how low they work at low opening rates. Because sometimes big injectors don't work very well down at low pulse widths. So you have to see. I don't know what the injector slope looks like on those, and I don't know what they look like way down low. But as long as you can tune them and keep getting the air fuel that you want, and as long as the pattern is still good at the, because you're talking about all down at the low stuff for drivability. David Varzor just gave you good props on his video that just came out. Yeah, I get along really well with David, and I've been friends for a long time. 4 cylinders over 2 liter is inherently unbalanced. That's true. That's where they tend to put these balance shafts in. They did on the Porsche 968s too. In fact, they had to pay royalties to Mitsubishi for that. Currently piecing, this will be the last one for today. I got to get going. Currently piecing together a 351 AFR heads. Good choice on 37675. This will be my first blow through setup. Would you buy a blow through ready carburetor or modify a standard carburetor? I'm not sure about modifying them. Maybe there are videos up on how to modify them. I've never tried something that somebody else did. We've only ever run the CSU stuff and the quick fuel stuff that's already done, and those seem to work pretty well. One of the keys to getting a blow through working is being able to adjust the carburetor for your setup. So I can't answer the do-it-yourself blow through stuff because I've never tried it. Are the trick flows that look like double humps any good? Yeah, they are. They're much better than original double hump is. They just made it look externally like that. And on that note, it's time to go. Go get your projects done. I'm going to go talk to David. I got a couple other phone calls to make. I've been working on another video, and we'll see you guys all tonight. Bow, 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 bow.